Welcome to Amidon Planet. I'm your host, Joel Amidon. Thank you for joining me in this never-ending quest to learn how to teach better. Today on episode 123, folks, we've got Dr. Josh Hertel. Josh is a professor in the Mathematics and Statistics Department at the University of Wisconsin, the Crosse. In addition, Josh does a lot. We're going to share a lot of his bio towards the beginning. You'll get to share some things. But Josh is also a financial educator and coach through Cooley Financial Coaching. And again, you're going to hear a lot about that and this whole idea about embracing the teaching lifestyle. Josh is a fellow cheesehead. He's from Wisconsin. He's an outstanding human with some great thoughts, ideas, and practices to share. Lots of good stuff here. You're going to want to pay attention to those show notes at amazonplanet.com/episode 123. In addition, Josh is also my go-to source for what new game, like tabletop games, like for instance, our current tabletop game that we like is Viticulture, where you kind of run your own winemaking vineyard, and then, or else we've got Wingspan, where you're talking about birds. Some of you might know that. Settlers of Catan is another tabletop game. I mean, Monopoly, obviously, that's a tabletop game. But anyway, Josh always has great recommendations for games with different levels of complexity. He kind of gets into that a little bit. So I couldn't help but ask for his latest recommendations, and we'll put links to that in the show notes as well. One quick disclaimer, Josh and I are going to talk a little bit about personal finance. It's a passion of Josh's, especially thinking about it from the perspective of an educator. And the information this is just a podcast, folks. It's educational and entertainment, right? So you should do your own research and consult a professional before making any financial decisions. Lots to get to here. Again, pay attention to the show notes at amazonplanet.com/episode 123. We'll put lots of links to Josh's stuff and all the things that he mentions. So without further delay, here is my conversation with Dr. Josh Hertel. Again, I'll record something at the beginning and the end, but
sure.
The most important part is saying, hey, Josh Hertel, welcome to Amidon Planet. How are you?
Well, hi. Thanks for having me. I'm doing well on this fine St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, exactly. Let's lift our pints of Guinness. No, that's probably, I think we're both working. So, yeah.
Smithix. I like Smithix.
Oh, I never got to try that. There we go. If you're going to try it, today might be the day. Hey, Josh, thanks for being willing to come on. Both two cheeseheads together. Mm-hmm. I believe you're from Neenah, Wisconsin, right? Is that right?
I taught in
Neenah.
I taught in Neenah. Yeah, I'm from over by Green Bay, from outside in the country of the town of Denmark. But yeah, then I taught. I went to school here. I've been in Wisconsin for quite a while. Yeah. So I went to University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire for my undergraduate work, and then I taught in Neenah, and then I went down to Illinois State for my master's and PhD work, and then I got a job at La Crosse, University of Wisconsin La Crosse, which is beautiful. It's a beautiful part of the state. You know?
The bluffs and
the right. Like people who aren't from here don't understand how different it is when you look around, like, the river, the bluffs. It kind of feels like, kind of mountainy. It's sort of not at all, but it kind of feels that way when you're here and you see, fog on the bluffs.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned three places in Wisconsin, and just like as we're getting the background, thinking about the Green Bay area, Eau Claire, and then La Crosse, which are, just about, like east to west, sort of like, little La Crosse is a little bit more south, but like all the diversity of landscapes that you have to even go through, like go on 29 between Wisconsin or between Green Bay and Eau Claire whoever designed that road basically had a ruler and they're like, hey, we're going to go from here to there. But versus the roads that going from La Crosse to Eau Claire are incredible, like these hills and ups and downs and going in and around. Oh yeah. So,
And La Crosse to Green Bay takes you across sort of swampy areas,
cranberry land,
right there. Right. It is really interesting. And that's the thing. I don't know if folks have a vision of Wisconsin as sort of rolling hills with dairy cattle, and there certainly is that in some areas, but here we have a really different landscape, and it's really beautiful. And it's also been, I think, pivotal in what makes La Crosse unique and, makes it the place that I want to live, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so, so you did your degree, your master's and PhD at Illinois State, right? Is that what you said?
Right. Yeah, I went to I went to Eau Claire for music education, math education, and I graduated with both. I student taught in both, and then I ended up teaching mathematics, and then went and did a master's in math and a PhD in math ed at Illinois State. And I loved it. It was great.
Another very flat area is down in Illinois State, Bloomington Normal area. Yeah,
right. Right. If you drive to Peoria, Peoria's got a river right going through it, and it's very pretty. Bloomington Normal tends to be it's a railroad town, I think, and so it doesn't have a lot. Although there are some areas if you drive a little bit.
Oh yeah. Well, my wife is from Springfield, Illinois, so like we'd have to pass by there all the time, and just got to know where the Culver's is around there. So where to stop. So we're here. This is a conversation that started. We were just talking beforehand. Like starts like as many of the podcast episodes that I've kind of had lately is like it's a side conversation, right? It's like hey, let's. Here's something that's interesting that I've been thinking about. And it's like, this would be great to share with others. And so you've been thinking deeply about this idea about personal finance for educators and even more recently, this embracing the teaching lifestyle. And so why do you feel called to talk about it? Like why you stopped me in the hall at AMTE and we started having this conversation. Like what's behind this? What's the fire behind this?
Yeah, and you sent me this question ahead of time, and I appreciated like how it made me reflect more, because that's been part of my why is there a fire? Why am I interested in this? Why am I talking about it in all these different spaces? Because it's not just chatting with somebody at AMTE. It's having conversations with family, with colleagues, with teachers, and I think. So this is my 12th year, end of my 12th year at UW-La Crosse, and I think I'm at a point where I'm seeing colleagues and students who are coming into the profession and then leaving the profession.
Yeah,
and I'm asking myself, I've been in education longer than that, and I've had colleagues who I taught with leave, and there's a lot of complicated reasons for that, but. A lot of times I'm asking myself, like, how much of this is around a finance discussion and how much of it is, life, family, all kinds of stuff. So my short answer to your question is I think this is a space where I feel like I can make a difference in helping folks if they see this as a profession that they want to embrace and they're trying to figure out how do I make this financial boat go. I think that's what I'm seeing this as a space where I can really make a meaningful difference. And I mean, I feel like my scholarly work has been important. I really care a lot about how we teach math with technology. I've been doing a lot of ungrading, doing different kinds of assessment in my own classes, and I think that's an area that I'm leaning into more. But for a lot of those things, I just get concerned that like nobody. It doesn't actually lead to my students staying in teaching.
Yeah,
and that's the big question, right? Is how do we help people who love this thing, who want to do this thing, stay in it with us as long as they want, right? I don't want to. I think I want to be careful. I don't want people to teach for 35 years. I think that's a whole different discussion. But I do want people who are passionate about education to see that this is a space that you can, even with the challenges, you can thrive and you can do well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even, just going back to the thing that you just mentioned about like all the things that you're preparing your teachers to do within the classroom in order to make the quality experience better, to get more out of the whole teaching spirit, to probably push on some of the,
right.
Like we're always pushing on what is math teaching look like, whether it's like your own experience or what it looks like on TV or movies or whatever, right. Versus like, no, this is what it could look like right here. And like, that's more satisfying. That's more, fulfilling. And then when you get to the, the dinner table with family at around a holiday, and it's like,
right.
Well, you're not making any money. Right.
Right.
Or something like, and like, okay, but it's hard to come back with, but look at my assessments.
Yeah.
Like they're so authentic. Like it's hard to respond that way, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think that's part of the thing is, we live in this culture that is heavily focused on the idea that accumulation of money is what we should be measuring our worth as. And I see teaching as a space where there are a lot of things that you can embrace as beneficial about being a teacher. There's a lot of ways it pays you back, but financially, it really isn't. I mean, I don't think, no, unless somebody's going to argue with me, I don't think teaching is how you become, making six figures and stuff. Maybe some teachers in specific areas, but that is not the daily reality. So I think we've got to do a better job of talking about like the benefits of teaching, but we also have to recognize the reality that if we don't help people prepare to be in that financial space, they won't be able to last. They're going to go work for whatever, an insurance company or something, because they've probably got the math skills, right, to go do it. So,
right. Oh yeah.
So I think that's the practical reality. When I have these really, I think, great conversations with my students in a capstone course or something, and we talk about all the things, like we talk about assessment, we talk about equity, we talk about these ideas, unless we can actually get that into a reality where they can, buy food and live where they need to live, it doesn't matter. So that's the quandary. So that's why I really appreciated your question. Why are you doing this?
Yeah. And I guess too, the going back to think about the funds and the money and like just this mindset of accumulation. And that's something I've been trying to push on my kids and whatever, like these ideas, like what truly is happiness and contentment. I mean, we can get deep and philosophical here now, but even popular media has pushed on it too, where it's like, look at like Succession, where there's these kids that have everything in the world, but they're not happy at all. Thinking about having some sort of sense of fulfillment. All right. Yes. If I'm teaching, I'm connected to a community. I can see the value I'm involving with kids. Now, how do I also then manage the funds or steward the funds that I've been given in order to maintain and now like fulfill this kind of role that I see myself doing going forward?
Right. Yeah. And I think it's a complicated path. It's a complicated discussion. And one of the things I come back to is context really matters. Your particular situation will afford you with different opportunities and different challenges. And so I think trying to offer general advice that would be applicable for everyone, it just won't work. But I think, thinking about what are the reasons that I teach. And so, I teach because I love to get to know people, because I want to build relationships with people. I teach because, I want to see a community and foster community. I teach because I want to see people grow and change, and I love to see my students develop, right? And those are, I mean, as much as that sounds completely separate from finances, unless I'm also mindful that I also have to teach because it's how I pay for, the mortgage. And like that's the practicalness of this. And we have to recognize that it's so taboo to talk about money, like salaries. We can talk about people making a lot of money, but when we address, hey, how much do you make? That becomes a real sort of challenging conversation, even in families where you might talk about a lot of stuff. So I think that's been part of what I try to the last, 5-10 years, been really thinking about how do I communicate with my own family. The reality's not from a I want what you've got sort of lens, right? But more from this is where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
And I just last year I had an uncle pass away, and he had not been communicating about his finances, and oh my gosh, what a challenge to go through while we're grieving and have to go through this whole essential financial discovery process, right? And and so much of it could have been we wouldn't have had to have that conversation had we had earlier conversations. So I think that's where it's it might also be something like when you get into your 40s, this is just a thing you think about.
That's right. Get a little gray on the temples. Now all of a sudden growing the beard out, like, hey, there's a little bit more salt than pepper in here. So yeah.
That's right. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So, you have, I love your websites. You got some good stuff, and then you got a blog. And one of the recent blog posts is on embracing the teaching lifestyle. Shared it on LinkedIn, and so we'll definitely we're gonna have lots of links. Let's just say there's gonna be lots of links in the show notes here. And so, what are some? You talked about context, and that we can't really get like, well, you should do this exact thing. Versus, so what are some big ideas that you want to share in again putting this work out there?
So I'd ask big ideas for which audience. So I'm gonna pick an audience.
Let's go
early
teachers,
educators.
Early educators, fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm thinking a lot about early educators. And I think one of the things that even for us, so kids of the '80s, our reality and current kids, they're very different realities. When I got my first teaching job in Neenah, and we were soon to be married, and we decided to buy a house. And okay, just a very natural thing at that point was to say, should we buy a house? Should you buy a house on a teacher's salary? And we did, and it wasn't a financial ruin. But even just from a broad perspective, like that house was maybe 3 times my take-home salary. I think my initial salary was like $27,000 or $28,000 or something, right? And now if you look at the same thing, it'd probably be 5 or 6 times, what a starting teacher salary was. And so I think, for early educators, I would be really starting to ask them about like, what are your goals? Where are you trying to go? And be careful about taking knowledge that has been the way that we've done things, either in your family or culture that you're being told. Be really careful about that when it involves pretty big financial decisions, because I don't know that it's worthwhile for teachers to buy in, certainly right now, but just in general, just if you look at and your first couple of years of teaching, is that a good idea? That's a whole other thing. Yeah. But I think that's a challenge. I think also for young teachers, I really want them to become aware of the flow of money in and out of their life. I think the way you do that is by starting with a budget. It doesn't have to be to the penny, but it needs to be something on paper that is acknowledging that things come in and things go out. And if you can first get the things come in, things go out, then you can start thinking about how much is coming in and how much is going out. But you've got to first keep track. In some way, and the creation of the smartphone has created all kinds of new ways to take things out. There's all kinds of new, I call them predatory structures. But the other day, like a little while ago, we decided to buy my daughter a computer, not a really expensive computer, just a couple $100. And here was this option at checkout that was like 4 easy payments, and you get a 25 bucks off or 30 bucks off. And it really, what was it? Well, it was sort of this sign up for this other service, and they're going to take a little fee. And yes, it will be cheaper, but if you default on it, it will not be cheaper. So, and those kind of things, I think, like sports gambling, like there's just so many new ways to take money out of your system that didn't exist in the 80s and 90s. This didn't exist.
Oh, yeah, and so subscriptions, all the subscriptions and things that you could have.
Right. And so I just feel like that is a particular challenge for new teachers. What are the subscription services? How are you keeping track of them? All that kind of stuff. So I think those are 2 sort of central things that I want my teachers to think about. And then I think about like more of a lifestyle discussion about, what are you able to do now in your 20s that would, I would say, pay dividends, but they're not dividends in money terms. They're dividends in memory terms. So what are things you can do now that you will reflect on and enjoy and think about for the whole career, right? Yeah. And can you fit those in? And I think there's a lot of really good chat. If you look in like the personal finance spaces, and you see and read people talking about this idea that like experiences are cheaper when you're younger. You could live on, peanut butter and jelly and go backpacking or do whatever in your
Right, right.
20s. And you would never think about that in your 40s or your 50s when you've got kids.
Right. No, actually, yeah. There's a song that by Drew and Ellie Holcomb. It's called "Put Your Money in the Memory Bank."
Yeah.
And so, like, coming down to those goals and things, and thinking about, well, what do you value versus, someone be like, well, I think I'm supposed to buy a house, but I really like
Right.
backpacking and adventure. So it's like, well, is it the supposed to, or like what you're being called to? Like, I can live a little bit
Right.
cheaper and do these things that I would get a lot of a life
Right.
out of,
Right. And your flexibility in your 20s is typically greater than it is in your 30s or your 40s. So, I was chatting with a student the other day who's interested in teaching abroad for a few years
Yeah.
after they graduate, right? Well, what a great way to do two things that you want to do and not, there are if you have the flexibility, there are different paths that you could take. And that's why a lot of what my blog is talking about is sort of this idea. You've got goals, you've got to have goals, you've got to be thinking about what do you want to do, even if they're fuzzy, right? Just some ideas. You've got to be thinking about like what is the behavior that you are willing to adopt, and some people are willing to not eat a lot of variety of things and really minimize that budget to spend it in other areas. Some people are like, no, I want to eat this way. And then there are also this sort of finance side of it, right? Like what are
Yeah.
the vehicles at your disposal as a teacher? There's some unique things for teachers. So I would just say that one of the things, if people are listening to this and they're a little bit further in their career, and hopefully they're learning about their pension or whatever defined benefit plan or other plan that they have as part of being an educator. But I would also encourage them to check out like 457 plans and 403Bs. And I am not a financial planner. But these are different tools, and 457s in particular are a special tool that teachers can use that I think are worth checking out. So in my world, this financial personal finance thing is about behavior, it's about goals, and then it's about like the mathematics of it. But sometimes we get, like we just said, we get really focused on the math. We're like, if I just had X amount of money, then everything would be fine. And that's like, nah, that's really not actually true. I mean, the people who make six figures don't necessarily live paycheck to paycheck. Some of them do live paycheck to paycheck, an alarming number, actually.
Yeah. Well, and it's so the big things I'm hearing, these big ideas, like be aware of your goals. Like what are you trying to accomplish, or what, your goals in life, whatever. Inputs
Right.
and outputs, be cognizant, start being aware of what's going in and what's coming out. And then also being aware of these unique financial products that are out there. And then I guess this is also a time to say, like, one of your, I don't know what you want to call it, Josh, like a side project of Cooley, was it Cooley Financial Coaching? Is
Oh
that
yeah,
right?
I started doing a little financial coaching. So this is kind of an interesting space, and for me, it's a learning opportunity as much as anything else. Where I'm basically building budgets with people. We're talking through these ideas of what are your goals, and if you start with goals, one of the great things to do is after you start identifying goals is then to say, which of these things does it matter if I do them now, or could I do them in 10 years and it wouldn't matter?
Yeah.
So I would say, like, let's say I'm not going to go, backpacking, but let's say backpacking in Europe was a thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, so that's a thing that you really wanted to do. Where does that live in your timeline? Assuming that you're healthy and everything, it's probably going to be easier to do that in your 20s and your 30s and your 40s than it is in your 50s, 60s, 70s. And
Yeah.
so, like, I think that's in part what I'm, doing with this little thing on the side where I'm just chatting with people, building budgets, building goals. I think the other thing that we didn't talk about that I usually bring people to is creating a financial overview document that communicates what everything is, so that you can talk with people, and not from the lens of this is how much money I have. It's more like here is where everything is. Here are where the bank accounts are. Here are where the brokerages are.
Yeah.
Insurance, assets, all that stuff. And that's a thing that you can update once a year. And then you can just set goals with, if you're married or if you have a partner, you can set goals together and then make those decisions, sort of with one of you maybe serving. I call myself sometimes the chief family financial officer, the CFFO. And so I think one of you can assume that role, and sort of saying, here's where we're at, because I'm just finding for myself, like what are the things that my wife and I want to do when we've got two kids, younger children, and how does that look in the next 10 years? What are our particular goals, for our situation?
Well, and so, I mean, you're talking about this, like embracing the teaching lifestyle, and you talk about this idea of, having your goals and things, and even some of the things you talked about, like backpacking around Europe. And like thinking about that person that is making, let's say $600,000, right? If they wanted to spend a month backpacking around Europe, they might lose their job, like they probably don't have that much vacation, right? They might like it would be a major thing versus like you could do that a lot, like the time wise, you could do that a lot easier as a teacher, and figure out how to do it on a budget than how to figure out how to do it with that 600,000. So like, I think when when I saw what you were writing about with embracing the teaching lifestyle and some of the conversation that we had, it's like you might be trading money for freedom of time and things and on like what you were able to do. So like, you big ideas. I think you had the goals, inputs, outputs, but also thinking like, well, what is your time worth? Like and you're specifically, even what's your time worth in your 20s and 30s, which are far gone for both of us. Sorry, but
and your time. And I think it's a fiction to think that your time is there's actually a dollar amount, because if you have $1 million and a few years to live, or a few days to live, I mean, like we've got to get past. There is a floor. There's a floor, and the floor is determined by your context, your situation. That you need to make this much to be able to live comfortably, and then past that floor, you need to decide what you want to do, right? And I think that's really important, helping people. Because if you haven't met the floor, right, that's a different discussion. We're talking kind of in a privileged space, absolutely privileged space, saying we've met the floor, right? Yep. But I think that's what I want to communicate is that going backpacking in Europe and being a teacher, being a passionate football coach and being a teacher, having a side hustle that you do on the weekends or in the summer and being a teacher, you're not failing at teaching, right? Like you're succeeding at the teaching lifestyle. You're succeeding at recognizing that this profession that you love is one that also gives you time to do things that you love and you care about. And if we can, elevate that, one of my kiddos, one of their teachers, does art and loves to go to art shows on the weekend, right? And I have a student who I like to bring up. He really loves woodworking. He sees that he can do woodworking and do this on the side, and he loves mathematics. He loves teaching math. So, like, I think that's what I want people to communicate is like, stop focusing so much on salary, and start focusing on like the benefits of this way of moving through the world. And, I think we've all encountered those people who are coaches and are teachers, and they come in with this like joy, like they love these things. They get to know kids and these different, so we just interviewed some new candidates for the program, and like so many of them are just loving sports and loving math. Right.
Yeah.
So
like just those combinations and like thinking of like the side hustles, and like you're going to pick a side hustle if it's probably something that you enjoy doing, right? Whether it is like, like you talk about the woodworking, like something, a piece of wood that or piece of furniture that we've had in our house since my kids were babies. Like, it was a fellow teacher. This is something he did on the side, created furniture. It was a changing table for my son. It now houses my record player and,
Right.
and all my records. And it's like, it's this heirloom piece that I've enjoyed forever. And Jacob Brickle, like, who did it up at Sauk Prairie, Wisconsin, is like, now he's not only a part of my life as a colleague, but now he's a part of my life forever as this, having this piece of furniture in my life. And
This
like,
beautiful thing. Yeah.
yeah, that's I mean, there's some fulfillment there as well, and not just like, oh, just trying to do this to scrape by. No, like, you have more freedom to do that with that lifestyle.
Right. And I think the idea that you can do things on the side for money, or you can do them for love. Like I was asking you, like, what are you doing this podcast for?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think I am really into tabletop games, and I started a gaming convention here in town, and I ran it for 10 years, and I set it down. We're not doing it this year, but like, why did I do that? And it wasn't a monetary gain. It was about community, and it was about my love of what I was doing, and it fit within. I could do that in the summer as long as I think my wife was incredibly patient, and and I think that's right. That's a part of it. But I think those are the kinds of things that if young folks see themselves as really having these kind of different interests, they might, and they love math, they or whatever, right? They love teaching something. They can see this path for themselves in this, field.
Yeah. Well, and like, we were talking about this, and maybe I should break now for my ads. No, just kidding. But like, being able to like tap into those passions and things that you enjoy, I don't know, like, again, that goes back to those goals and interests and things that you want to get out of life. And it's like, that's pretty cool that you were able to do that, take a passion, and then also help others with their things. And it's like that teaching thing is that thread throughout. Like, you're using this gift of teaching that you have, like whether it's like teaching people games, and we will be asking for some game recommendations at the end of the episode, Josh. I forgot to add that. But then also just now this financial coaching, and you see like, wow, I'm able to use this gift that I have for teaching in these other areas as well. And I, even hearing like, folks that are long retired, one of my clinical instructor, he's been retired for a while, but he still goes back and finds other ways to use this gift that he has. He doesn't need the money, but it's just like, he enjoys doing it. He loves it. Mm-hmm. And so, it's how do we, kind of embrace that calling, but then also steward the resources that we've been given in order to continue doing that, right?
Right. And how do we, I think, break out of molds that sort of tell us this is what, I working with freshmen, they come in and they have kind of like, here's the window when this is going to happen, and here's the window when this is going to happen. And often as they experience things, they realize that plan isn't really how it's going to play out. And it causes them a lot of understandable anxiety and uncertainty. And, teaching gives you space. It just gives you space to do things, to just try things. If you can try stuff for a summer, and it doesn't have to, you don't have to make any money at it. You can just try it and love it and hope you break even and then keep going. Right.
Yeah. Exactly. So what are some things, we talked about big ideas, but you already talked about one thing to do is probably that financial overview document, kind of like, hey, let's put everything down in one place. What are some other key practices that you would want educators, either early career educators or 47-year-old math teacher educators living in the South, to take after listening to this episode?
So I would first ask, do you understand do you have a pension?
Yeah. Well,
do you know how your pension works?
Called as a pension. So those are some good questions. I have a retirement account. Yeah.
Well, and I think some, like in Wisconsin here, we have the Wisconsin retirement system. It's a defined
still too.
Yeah. So it's a defined. Yeah. Do you know how that works? Right.
Yeah, I've got the core and the variable. I'm in a mix.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I think that's the first thing is people need to understand what that retirement system is. And I'm not sure if every state is still have pensions. I think some states might have shifted their public employees away from it, but a lot of the states around us still do. And then the point of understanding that is to understand what are the inputs that I can actually change or control in some way, and what are the ones that I don't have control over.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first thing. As teachers, I'm just going to speak inside of the context of Wisconsin. We have a really good Wisconsin retirement system.
Yeah, you do.
It's well funded. It is a great benefit, and so everybody should know how to. Before the 2 years before you retire or 3 years before you retire, you should know how the thing works a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But then I would take a step back and say, okay, so now if I understand how that works, then like, what are the goals that I have in my life, and then are there some financial goals that I should start? So one of the questions you asked me was like, what would I do differently now if I were starting out teaching now? And that's in some ways a hard question because like the context is very different.
Right.
But one of the things I'd probably think more about my time differently than I did as a beginning teacher. I've actually, over the last 4 or 5 years, started to institute rules it took me a while, right? It took me a while to institute rules for how I spend time. So, for instance, I have a 48-hour no work rule that starts on Friday at some time, and then 48 hours later on Sunday, it turns off. And like the whole goal of that was to honor, first off, that like, you shouldn't be working on Saturdays. You should be, but I think part of it was just to become aware of how much stuff are you taking home? And some people are able to put all their stuff at their job and keep it in that box. And I am not one of those educators. I don't work that way, but I am able to create rules like that protect my time in a certain way. I don't work in the summer anymore. As a beginning, academic, I think that was a thing that I did because that was the time that I had to do writing and stuff, right? Like, you get too involved, but now I don't. And there's really nothing that anybody can offer me to give them summer back. I just, I refuse.
Yeah.
So I think those were, a couple of things that I had been thinking about immediately. I would think more about time.
Because I'm assuming we're both on 9-month contracts. Are you on or 9 or 10 or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, hey, that's my contract. There you go. Yeah.
Right. And, I think that's initially when you're younger, I think time seems like a thing that you just have a lot of. And really, spend more time with family, spend more time doing things, spend more time with, I think, experiences. I should have done in my early 20s, I should have gone on trips more with my wife when we were newly married, and we could go somewhere and it really wasn't that expensive, and we could have a great adventure. And but because we bought a house, right, then a lot of like the home ownership stuff became a thing that we that we focused on a lot. So I think those were some advice I would give to myself were I starting again. But one thing that I would not change, and I would also encourage people to think about looking into Roth IRAs, because I think that is a superpower for people in our income brackets. I think if you're in your 20s and you can figure out how to max out your Roth every year, your 40-year-old self will thank you.
Because you're putting in money post tax.
Yeah, it's after tax money. Yeah,
after tax money, but when it comes out, no taxes are taken out. Right.
So. And what you're gaining by maxing it in your 20s is you're gaining, let's say you taught for 20 or 25 years or something, you're gaining an extra doubling essentially, right? Like lots of assumptions in the room, but like if this thing is in sort of a mostly stock portfolio and you're making 7% or 8% a year, that's huge. It's huge to have that. So for myself and my wife, I think that was, we were in our 20s, we had Roths because it was a thing that I had a family friend suggest that we do. And, I didn't think anything about it until the pandemic came, and then we had changes in jobs and things, and suddenly having a Roth made discussions about like what are we going to do next easier because it's sort of sitting in the background, right? It's
Yeah.
a thing that so my 20-year-old self gifted my 40-year-old self with flexibility that I never thought of when I was in my 20s. I didn't think
Yeah.
about it that way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
So, yeah, and I think the other thing that when in the early 2000s, we didn't really have discount brokerages like we know them now. So whether it be Schwab or Fidelity or those kinds of things, and now like there's a lot of this that people can do independently on their own. And it's watch some videos, right? Like you make
Yeah.
sure you read all the prospectus, but it's not that hard. And I think that wasn't a reality when I started teaching. It was just starting to become a reality, but it wasn't there yet.
Yeah. Well, I guess too, I had a neighbor. His name was Bill Gates, not that one, but he wanted to come talk to teachers because I think, and he saw it as like, hey, this is something that might help them. Wanting early career teachers because you get your benefits package and all of a sudden you're signing things, you get insurance
Right.
and all that stuff, and you don't really thinking about all these. What do all these mean from a financial perspective? But then, thinking about the people out there, and it's actually another reason why to start this podcast is like how many people are thinking about teachers. And so like when these books are coming out and whatnot, it's like, are they really focused in on, well, what does this mean for teaching better? No, a lot of times it's probably wasn't focused on to improve a business or whatnot, or
Right.
like people with lots of money that want to manage it. But like, what about, the teaching, kind of focus? And that's why I love what you're doing, Josh, is like trying to think like, it's a different context, right? And like,
Right.
there's different contexts across the country too within teaching, but it's still even thinking about the teaching just in broadly, like there is some things there that like, what is the best situation to put yourself in from a financial perspective? And so,
Right.
and that is different from someone who is like just starting off and they've got a big, they get signing bonuses or they're getting like these huge bonuses. They're like the same as your starting salary.
Right, your annual salary, they're
yeah.
getting a bonus, and
Yeah.
I think part of this too. A couple of I have many draft posts, and I come back. Sometimes it's really hard for me to figure out what should I publish next on the blog. I don't know how much people read it in order, anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like the teaching lifestyle one, I just published because I had been starting to go through some cases because I basically want to say, look, here's the benefit of the Wisconsin retirement system pension. I'm going to just give you some cases about like they have a calculator, right? I'm not doing anything other than just plugging numbers into their calculator, show you what's going on. And I realized that as I was doing that, I was starting to focus too much on trying to make things big, bigger things bigger, which I have an earlier post on, which says like, I think this is about focusing less on numbers. And so that's why the teaching lifestyle had to come forward as sort of a post. But another one that I have is really thinking about enough. Define what enough means for you. And enough could be a financial goal. It could be like, but you've got to figure out what that is. Because I think some people still define success as 35 years in the classroom, retiring when you're just at Social Security. And I mean, I'll be honest, right? I'm gonna define success for me as retiring at 55 if I can, and then transitioning into a different role. Transitioning into something like you had said, where I'm still engaged in different ways, but maybe I've let go of the meetings. I don't have to do like the things that about my job that I am not as thrilled about. So I think that's where we need to figure out what enough means. And there's some really great books for people's getting their mind around it. I mean, one book that I really enjoy, young educators I think should read it. It's called A Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. He sets out. He wrote it for he's a financial manager. He wrote it for his daughter who was graduating college as sort of a general guide to think about things. I think there's a lot of really wonderful information there. Another book I really love is The Psychology of Money. What is it by Morgan? Is it Morgan Pease? I might have that wrong, but like his outlook on thinking about this whole psychology side of finances, And a third one, if I'm throwing out book recommendations, would be Die with Zero, which is again, it's like a mindset book. It's like trying to think about the idea that what is money actually worth? It's actually about time, right? Like you give your time to get it, but then it can give you time when you have it,
Yeah.
and it can give you experiences. And so like his central premise in that book is why don't you try dying with a zero net worth? Why don't you try to spend everything so that like it's an impossible point, right? The
Yeah.
impossible point where you have spent everything, but you've had the maximum possible experience. And I think those are really good things to be thinking about, wherever you're at in your financial journey, but certainly early on, like what are those experiences I want to have, and how might I do those earlier, and really justify when people are like, why are you spending this? Why are you doing this? You could say, well, look, I want to do this now, and it's a great time to do
Yeah.
it.
Well, and I think, there's some other books that I'm going to throw in, just throw it on the pile. There's one called How to Be Rich, but it's again going back to that mindset of thinking like, well, again, what do you want to spend money? Like if you really enjoy coffee and you want to go out for coffee,
Right.
okay, but then you really don't care what you eat for lunch. Well, okay, well, that doesn't mean, okay, I'm going to go get the fanciest drink, or I'm going to have the fancy equipment to make really good coffee. But then, yeah, maybe my meal budget is a lot lower. Like I'm going to
Right.
use like travel. Like we kind of talked about all these things. Like what is important to you, and so like then accounting for it. And if you know the ins and outs, and you could think, and that one is about. There's lots of again, all of these books. Some of these books have just a lot of tips in it, but I think that's a good one
Mm-hmm.
from a mindset perspective, and one that I
Right.
could get my daughter to read. So, which is
Right.
good too.
And I'm so it's Morgan Housel. I just looked it up because I knew the last
Yeah.
name for the Psychology of Money. Um, I think that's a book that I read 2 or 3 years ago, and I think it's just it is. So how much of this is psychology, and how much of this is the math?
Yeah. Well,
Right? How
it's
much is this?
yeah, and someone who's very popular. I don't know, Tim Ferriss, the 4 hour work week, where I mean he was
Hmm.
doing things whatever he could to get the much money to have the lifestyle that he wanted,
Right.
and he's made a lot of money doing that now. And so like there's having those sorts of mindset is such a big deal. It seems with all of
Hmm.
this, Josh. Like just like
Hmm.
what, and making sure it's you're making the decision, and again, not the default coming to you, because it's coming at you from all with. If you got you got a smartphone in your pocket. Like there's
Right.
somebody think, hey, here's what you should have or should be doing, versus like, no, I'm going to make this decision for myself. And I think there's the power, right?
Right. Right. And being very thoughtful that um, like I'm definitely taking a stance in my this personal finance for educators stuff where I don't want to. I'm not trying to make money here, right? Like, and I'm like, if people want me to do financial coaching with them, that's a separate thing. I'll do that. But that's in the space, in the personal finance space, people are trying to sell things all the time,
Yes.
and they are going to tell you this product is the thing that you need or whatever, and you might not even see the costs because the financial instruments can be pretty complicated. So that's one of the things, like be really thoughtful about don't people who pressure you into things, people who are trying to get you to buy or to do something, how are they being paid? That's the question
Yeah.
you should
Yeah.
be asking yourself. I mean, maybe it is a good deal, but how are
Yeah.
they being paid?
Right. Yeah. There's some something's coming from everywhere. So yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
What? So anything else that you want to talk about, like key practices or thing? I know we're kind of bouncing around a little bit, but anything else
Um,
there?
well, I think for myself, I'm looking at kind of the notes that I took over
Yeah. Yeah.
in your questions. Um, I don't know. I think the big three things that I want to emphasize are folks need to budget, they need to communicate, and if they can make small changes, that is the key to big returns. So if it's saving $25 a week or so much a paycheck, particularly if they can automate it, that's the way to see behavior that changes long term. And if I can get my students to just think about budgeting, so they understand how things come in and out, how they're communicating, so creating financial overview documents, and then those small, I call it like compounding in life and compounding in finance, right? Like there are different versions of compounding. That I think can be really powerful for them in being successful. And the other thing is just we need to break the stigma. Okay, I think teachers have a little bit easier time of this because a lot of places still have salary schedules, so they can talk about, But like certainly in higher ed, it is this inequitable smorgasbord of, and it's really hard to have these conversations with colleagues when you're maybe in the same department or maybe in sort of nearby apartments. You're doing the same work, but you're being paid very different things for it, and it's. Somehow we have to bridge that and talk about it, because I don't see us actually being able to solve a lot of those salary inequities. It's just not how the system is built. But we should be able to communicate about it so that we can better plan and think. How can we, for instance, in a higher ed context, how can we create things that benefit everyone and not one? Like for instance, I'll give you an example. They were able to do a little one-time thing for employees of the university, and rather than doing it based upon 1% of your base, they just gave everybody a flat. I don't know if it was $600, right? They just gave everybody this. And now think about that for people who are only making $30,000 or $40,000 a year. What a difference that was for them, right? Like that was, and I think that was a policy that was based in that idea that like we recognize how inequitable this is, so why would we just do 1%?
Yeah.
So I think that we need to communicate more about stuff. Some things that I was thinking about that you had asked me, so I'll just throw them in here. The uniqueness of your personal finance context really matters. And so be careful about just taking advice from some guy who writes a blog without thinking about,
nobody go out and say, hey, Josh said to do that. Like, do your own research. Here we go.
Right. Well, and I think also just recognize that what are those opportunities that you have as part of your context?
Yeah.
What are those gifts, those talents, those family connections, whatever they be, So I think I'm constantly learning more as I work with people about how unique contexts can really make pretty substantial differences in how things play out. So context can't be forgotten.
Yeah. So just my final question, and then we're going to go into some of the bonus stuff. What major critiques of your post? What would be any responses to those major critiques? I don't know if you had anything.
I would say there's a privilege here that we have to acknowledge that, I'm speaking from a space of I can cover all my bills. I'm speaking from a space where I'm not $90,000 or $150,000 in debt. And some folks get stuck inside of those structures before they understand that they're stuck inside of them. It's like you're old enough to make a legal contract, but you're not quite there in understanding what you've done.
Right.
And unfortunately, those predatory structures are everywhere. I, as an undergrad, only had about $25,000 in debt. Which I thought that was great. And, I got a 2%, everybody's going to get angry at me, 2% of, loan rate. I mean, come on, this is dirt. And I think that's a critique I absolutely have of myself. Like, how much is this really helpful for everyone? Right. And I think the other thing is, let's not sugarcoat the realities that in some areas teachers, like the cost of living and teacher salaries might be okay and provide some sort of opportunities here, and then in other areas it's backwards, right? You've got teachers who are working additional jobs, and it's because they can't just make the minimum amount to live there. So and I don't claim to have the answers, but those are honest critiques.
Right. No, and that's I think that's a kind of the argument for some things is, hey, is this putting a Band-Aid on a bigger problem. Yes, teachers need to be paid
Right.
more. And so like, if you have the opportunity to vote or have voices in those conversations, make sure to communicate that as
Right.
early and often as possible. But yeah, I
It
think
it yeah.
we're
It
we're
also
speaking this certain
argues.
little space about how to use, given you're able to cover your bills, how do we either the mindset or set goals that help you live out the life that you want to live.
And I think it also suggests, so there's a behavioral discussion here too. Like, okay, so you live in this extremely high cost of living area. You living by yourself in a home, owning your own home might not be a thing that within that context is possible. But maybe you could have a roommate, or maybe you
Yeah.
could have two roommates. I mean, I think that's you have to then look at your behavior and say, well, how can I achieve something that's not the same but is achievable with what I have? So that's why I think goals, behavior, and the finances all have to roll together in thinking through these situations.
Nice. Nice. Well, thank you, Josh. We're gonna dive into some of these bonus questions and see. I gave them to you, so and want to honor your time. So it's like, take as long as short as you
Oh,
want.
sure.
What's the best thing you've learned to help you teach better? Like lately, what's the best thing lately you've learned to help you teach better?
So here's a little story. So I've been observing field students because one of the things I get to do, and I think it's like a privilege of my job to go see our
Yeah,
candidates
get
out in
into
this,
schools.
right? See schools, meet teachers, see real students who do or do not care about math. Their student, not my students, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
So I was in this middle school class, and there's so much energy. The students were so energized, and the teacher was so energized, and they were talking through a problem. And the teacher is just having students present stuff, and so he had one student come up and show their work, and then they asked, "Are there any questions?" And another student says, "Oh yeah, I got a different answer." And so this is the thing that I loved about the interaction is the teacher said, "Oh, okay." So they turned back to the first student, and he said, "Could you go back through your reasoning? Could you explain how you thought about it?" And so the student, sure. So the student went in, just talked about their stuff again, and then the teacher turned back to the second student who had asked the question, said, "So what do you think? Did that answer you?" So all this teacher was doing was mediating a conversation between these two students,
beautiful.
and had completely removed any "you're right, you're wrong, I am the authority in this space," had completely empowered these students to talk. And so in part, the interaction was great to see. It was great for my field student to see this.
Yeah, yeah.
Me too. But then secondly, it was just so normal, right? It was just so like, when you go into classrooms, you can pick up when things are just the way things work in this
Yeah.
space. So this was just the normal way that they interacted. And it made me think to myself too about when I'm having students present work, how am I like intentionally like turning my role into one of sort of mediator, one of
Yeah.
like facilitating, and not like I could have just said, "Oh no, she's right," or
Yeah.
talk about what's right, and then whatever. So that was really inspiring. That was just the other day.
That's awesome. Yeah, like that goal of getting students to talk about other students think, like even talking about their own thinking, and now the students thinking about another student's think, like, and that teacher's just like, almost like not manipulated, but it's like oh, I'm putting some moves into place to get this in interaction to happen. That's awesome. That's a good
Right.
one. Love it. Love it. So you talked about being a music major, a music ed major back in the day. And so what is one album you've loved to listen to? We like to talk about music on this. And I know,
Well, yeah.
context matters. So let's think about, like, do you want to think about it right now, or do you want to, like, you could put some
Right.
context around this, because maybe it's like, hey, working for the weekend on Friday at 3 p.m. I don't know.
Well, I
Little
think
lover boy.
I'll talk about right now. I've been listening to an album by Jesse Wells. I don't know if you've ever listened to Jesse
Oh,
Wells. It's kind of protest song stuff. He reminds me of Bob Dylan. And he just is able to speak a lot of hard truths in this very poetic and also raw sort of way. So he's got one song about the poor. He's got another one about healthcare.
yeah.
And for me, just because where I'm at, this really struck a chord. It's just really, to hear this artist talking about things, I really associate with it. But I also love, like if I have if I have a thing that I listen to make me excited, well, today it's listening to like Gaelic Storm or the Dubliners or
Yeah.
some kind of
There you
Irish
go.
music. I was listening to Gaelic Storm Special Reserve earlier.
That's right. Nice. Very good. And again, being from Wisconsin, you can go down to Irish Fest down in Milwaukee, which is always
Right. Well,
a
I'm
fun
actually
time.
wearing. We have an Irish Fest here in La Crosse,
Oh, there you go.
Irish Fest La Crosse, and
Nice.
they get Gaelic Storm. They typically set it between the Milwaukee and the Minneapolis Irish Fests, so
Yeah.
they'll get artists to stop here on their way from Milwaukee
Nice.
to Minneapolis.
Very
Yeah.
good. Yeah, La Crosse is also known for a lot of festivals. I know my dad was a sheriff and a police officer down in Black River Falls, and he would get hired to go down to La Crosse for Oktoberfest to
Oh yeah.
yeah, be a
Yeah.
presence, be a
Yeah.
presence.
The
Yeah.
this the you were about a town of about 55,000, and it triples during Oktoberfest. So
Yeah.
I would say Oktoberfest isn't there are some cultural elements to it, but I don't ever associate the music as much with
Yeah, yeah.
German music. There's some polkas and things, but
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, and again, maybe you had this too, but dancing the polka was one of our units in gym class.
oh yeah, that was a
And square dancing. Yes.
fifth grade. Yeah, I can tell you who I danced with too.
Yeah. Yeah. So knowing about your experience with tabletop games and running the conference, the CoolieCon, which I love CoolieCon because I was at Black River Falls and we were part of the Coolie Conference. So like that,
Oh, sure.
the Coolie region
Right. Right.
is a part of the Wisconsin right there.
And that's a thing that tabletop conventions do is that like there's a tabletop convention in Bloomington Normal called FlatCon, right?
There you
Like
go.
they
Hey,
they
perfect.
describe.
Yeah, perfect. So I don't know if you got any game recommendations for us. I know every now and then I'll ask you at a conference and you got a
Right.
few. So
It's a
what do you
really
got?
hard. Who are you playing with? So if you're, I'll tell you some stuff I've been enjoying playing with my 10 and 7-year-old. So if you like role playing, if you're interested in like really easy to get into role playing games, Hero Kids RPG is a very simple 6-sided die based RPG that my daughters and I really love playing. It's got the themes. You can get all the themes of
Yeah.
like a D&D sort of event without all the complex stuff. But then like tabletop games, like a party game we've been playing recently is Snake Oil. I don't know if you've ever played it, but
No.
it's a hilarious party game. Very easy to learn. I'm looking at my shelf. There's one called Break the Code that we really enjoy, which is more of a puzzly 4-player game. Small World is a really fun kind of war battle game on a board. Splendor is a great
Splendor,
yes, if you've never played it. So yeah, those are all kinds. I also like roll and write games. So like if you just play Quicks,
Yep.
Quicks is a great roll
We
and
just
write
played
game.
that during vacation. There you go.
Yeah. So those kinds of games, I think it really depends. When you start out gaming, you buy the stuff that you want to play. And then I think you go through this evolution where you realize like not everybody wants to play Arkham Horror for 7 hours. So you better buy some other games. And so then you start developing stuff for different audiences and different groups.
Yes. Yeah. I know.
So that's
we play a lot of Wingspan. We play Pan Am. We play
Okay.
We've been playing Viticulture, which is
sure.
Yeah. And so like those games, like that's become part of the DNA of our family. Like even my 13-year-old, he likes playing Viticulture and developing his winery. But but like there's some colleagues that if I say, hey, we're gonna play some of these games, like her eyes like roll back, kind of like Jaws, like just this dark, and it's like, well, we could play these other other games like Yahtzee or Scrabble. There we go, classic. Or gin, like nice card.
Yeah, I mean, Viticulture and Wingspan, or have you played Wormspan, the dragon themed version of that? Yeah, they sort of themed it with dragon, like worm as in a dragon. Like those are some pretty heavy games.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a you want, if you've got to take 25 minutes to explain the rules.
yeah, and you basically have to play a whole game just to like. Got it now? You got it?
Right.
Versus like Quicks, you can explain in a minute. Yeah, you're ready to go. That's awesome. All right. So we got lots of promo. We'll post lots of links to your blog, your your kind of
Oh,
academic
great.
website, your financial coaching website. Anything else you'd like to promote, Josh?
Well, I think, I'm always interested in if people have other suggestions for stuff they might like me to think about or noodle about. I mean, I think I'm community driven, and like my goal with this project is about community and helping folks. So, I mean, if anybody has an idea that they think, oh, it'd be great for you to talk about this, I think my next couple of posts are going to be about unpacking the pension system a little bit, and then I've talked about that idea of defining enough. I probably will have some more posts too about like how you can, assuming the pension exists, what that allows you to do. So, this is again is like you've got to have goals, but we can also talk about the math side. So I'm always, jumping, back and forth there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Josh. I appreciate you spending time on Amidon Planet.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, there it is. And maybe after listening to that conversation, you see why I wanted to title this episode Thriving as an Educator, Balancing Passion, Life, and Finances. Josh, again, has lots of different perspectives, and I love what he's bringing to the table. And just sometimes in thinking about what the world is telling us, and then thinking about, well, what do we value? What do we personally value? And, going back to a book that I'm reading right now, Cal Newport, talking about digital minimalism and engaging in solitude, where you are disconnected from others' influences, and like how that has become so rare. And it seems like in order to do the things that Josh talking about having goals and thinking about what do you really want, needing to disconnect from others. Like, it's like, I really want to be a teacher. I wanted to be a teacher. I felt called to be a teacher. And yes, there's lots of messages from the world that are saying not to, but when I disconnect, I can be like, yeah, this is part of who I am and what my identity is. And so thinking like that disconnect might be necessary, that solitude might be necessary. So anyway, I'm getting excited for a future episode about Cal Newport's book, Digital Minimalism. We'll put that we'll table that for right now. So, really quick, we're going to, lots of great feedback about the Cal Newport episode that I did with Allison DiLiberto. It was exciting to get a chance to talk to my sister-in-law, who's, again, very, very easy conversation partner to have, especially about that book, thinking about slow productivity, thinking about it with education perspectives from both of us. Again, lots of good feedback out there. I appreciate folks reaching out about it, and also the excitement maybe about thinking about digital minimalism coming up. So again, appreciate those of you reaching out through social media and other channels. And now for the album of the episode, where I share an album I've been listening to as a way to connect with you, but let's be honest, it's probably just an excuse to talk about music. So this week's album, I couldn't help but think about it, was the Freewheelin Bob Dylan. Freewheelin Bob Dylan has two songs that I really like. I mean, one, you can listen to it. It's got Blown in the Wind, obviously. It's a great song that obviously is from the early career of Bob Dylan. But he's got two songs on the B side of the album, Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, and Oxford Town. I don't know, Don't Think Twice, It's All Right. I don't know. It's in some movie, but when I heard it, it was one that I wanted to listen to over and over again. So one reason why I was excited to get this album in my hands. And also, too, from a personal connection, Oxford Town, which is about when the University of Mississippi was integrated. James Meredith joined the University of Mississippi, and there was riots. And not only riots, but the campus had to be taken over. Well, one, U.S. Marshals came and to help, protect the Lyceum, which is the central building of campus where James Meredith was going to come to register, and that got protesters came and were violent. Two people passed away in that conflict, and then the National Guard needed to come. J.F. Kennedy ordered the National Guard to come and take over control of the campus. And when I moved here in 2011, they were getting ready for, I believe, the 50th anniversary. And now that since then they've had the 60th anniversary. And so, Bob Dylan wrote a song about that and called it Oxford Town. So I don't know. It's a great album. Again, just another chance to think about music and how it, connects to your life and your reality, and just, I don't know, just being able to, you think about books, you think about music, you think about how much of someone's life or even the life that people get to talk about within those things, and then they get to share it with you. And when you actually do think about the nominal price that it is, we need, I don't know. That's kind of why, again, going back to why I want to buy albums is like, there's something there with regards to supporting those efforts. And so I want to keep doing that. I want to keep buying books, want to keep buying records. And so just to keep supporting those efforts. And speaking of support, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of AmazonPlanet.com. Show notes are available at AmazonPlanet.com/episode 123. If you'd like to support this podcast, here's a couple things you can do. You can subscribe, you can rate it, you can review it, and share it. And I've seen, when I have guests on, like Allison shared a post on LinkedIn to her episode, and people were commenting on it, and her network is different from my network. And maybe there's people that found some value in that episode and maybe find value in other episodes and then share it with others. Again, part of a community that we can do to help each other get to where we're trying to go. Right. And so, again, hopefully that was helpful to others. And if you think that this was helpful to you and you are thinking about somebody when you heard something in here, maybe it's an educator that might benefit from the wisdom that Josh has. And I think a lot of educators would. Send in this episode, and that's the point. I mean, we're not making truckloads of cash doing this. We're not making any money really, but really just trying to do this in order to spread, spread the information and trying to share information that we think could be valuable out there to those trying to teach better. All right. You can also subscribe to the email list to receive the Amazon Planet Dispatch for teaching resources and updates from Amazon Planet. And if you want to engage further, hey, submit a question, comment, or suggestion to the mailbag by sending an email to joel@amazonplanet.com. Lastly, I'm always looking to collaborate with those leading others to love through teaching. If you have an event or opportunity like the Full Steam Ahead event that I did a couple weeks ago in Shreveport, Louisiana, I went down there and talked. And so if you have a similar sort of event like that, email me at joel@amazonplanet.com or visit amazonplanet.com/about to fill out the request a call form. Just love to, again, work with others that are, again, trying to help people get better at teaching. So thank you for spending time on Amazon Planet. Special thanks to Josh Hertel for sharing his time and expertise. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. And finally, thank you to all of you out there learning to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you've been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.